You're listening to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. We all have leadership within us, and once we understand how to challenge perceived limitations, we're able to influence those we're leading. Josh is a leadership coach, trainer, and speaker. He's also a veteran of the United States Air Force with over 20 years of leadership experience. Are you ready to transform your leadership skills by tapping into unrecognized potential to achieve limitless results? Let's get ready for liftoff. It's time to go from great to greater. Here's Josh in today's episode.
Welcome to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Parnell, and today I'm excited to announce our guest is a leadership coach. He's a consultant. He's an author who recently published an incredible book, which we're going to talk about in this episode. He's also the founder and CEO of Lead Well, a leadership development company for mission-driven leaders and organizations. Our guest today is Jon Kidwell. Jon, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me and for being my new brother.
Yes, sir.
We've just been hanging out and we realized that we might be the exact same person.
We pretty much are the same person, which I think is amazing.
So let me redo that. Welcome to the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast.
Crushed it. Well, Jon, man, I'm so glad that you're on this episode. I know you have a wealth of knowledge that all of our listeners are going to be able to benefit from. But if you would, before we get into your book and what you do and how you do it, go ahead and tell the audience who you are and all the things, all the details about Jon Kidwell.
Goodness, I don't think we have enough time for all of those details. But what I will say is I was born in Michigan. I've been in Texas for 15 years. I've been married to my wife, Megan, a wonderful, wonderful wife, for nearly about the same amount of time. And I have 3 kiddos. They're 6, 3, 1. And we're going through birthday season, so I'm going to have to figure out all those numbers again here real quick. But they're absolutely wonderful. And like most of us, kind of my journey to get where I am has a lot of fun, a lot of frustrations up and down, where I've been a teacher, I've been in retail, I've been in not-for-profits, and leading as an executive and being laid off, and then starting a company and kind of being where we are today, where we get to go work with mission-driven leaders and organizations and try to help people be at their best. Because when leaders are at their best, all of the rest just seems to go much better.
That's right. As our boy Craig Rochelle would say, when the leader gets better, everyone gets better.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned fun, you mentioned frustration. One thing that you and I also share is faith. And, it does take a lot of faith to jump into something like what you and I are both doing, which is leadership coaching. If you would, take a moment to talk about what got you into the field of coaching and specifically leadership coaching.
So I'm a trained teacher, and I came out of school thinking I'm going to be a teacher. My great-grandpa was a principal. My grandpa was a principal. My uncle was a principal. My mom, special educator for 30 years, and then an administrator inside of a school. Like, this is what I was going to do. I've told everybody that since 3rd grade. And then God called me pretty abruptly in a different direction. But I say that because that foundation of teaching is one of the pieces that kind of kept stepping there, right? Have that. And so kind of in that leadership coach and training facilitation space, like all of this preparation that I didn't even know was preparation for something else.
Sure.
So then I get into the why, and I love leading. Like, I love leadership. I love business. I love people problems. I love figuring out how do we do business and treat people well. Like, I grab onto these things, right? And I had a wonderful leader who was coaching me, and she said, Jon, you'd be a much better leader if you stop giving so much advice all the time. And so that was the perhaps I'm not always right. Perhaps people don't always want to hear what I have to say. Perhaps there's a different way. And that is what got me into coaching. This different approach that said, you don't just have to teach. You don't just have to give advice all the time, but perhaps you could be really curious and you could start asking really thoughtful questions because you and I were riffing on this before, because all of a sudden you actually start getting better as the leader, but you also use this as a development tool to start developing other people. And so I started leaning into that and getting trained in coaching and going that route. And I realized that I really love it. And I'd turn it and start bringing it into my one-on-one meetings. And all of a sudden I was the guy that was like, well, what do you think we should do? Instead of saying,
Yeah.
here's what I think we should do.
So good.
It's just all of these little kind of building blocks just started coming together. And then I leave the why, not by choice. I say I was fired, but my wife says I was laid off, and I say semantics, tomato, tomato, right? Like at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And all of a sudden we get to this spot where we're talking and having coffee, and she's like, what do you want to do? I said, I want to help leaders be better leaders so they can lead at their best. Well, that's the thing. Like, let's go figure it out. And so teaching and this turn to having a coach approach to these things, to really focusing on leadership and business, to do it for a mission that's bigger than any of us, with the heart of a servant, thinking about these things for the business, just kind of all the pieces started coming together into what built and get to do every day now.
Love it, man. I think it's great to hear your story and your journey, and how it's very evident that certain things fall into place ultimately for you to be in the place that you're in today. You said the word servant, which I'm going to touch on here in a bit, but I also want to go back to something that you alluded to in terms of the importance of asking questions. I think the common misconception when you hire a leadership coach or a coach in general is that this person is expected to give you a lot of the answers and directives. Whereas you know, as a good leadership coach, Jon, it's not about directives. It's about direction. You can provide clarity and direction through questions. And I think for a lot of leaders, where we struggle is we are in a leadership role, we have a title, and we are formally leading people. And so we believe that we should have all the answers. We believe that we should be giving them our opinions and giving them directives, but we're failing to ask the right questions, asking open-ended questions. I love the fact that you asked, hey, what do you think we should start doing? What should we start doing? What should we stop doing? Those are the two questions I believe that any leader can ask to ensure that their team members have a voice to be heard, their opinions are going to matter, their ideas are going to be considered. So when was the time in your life, outside of when your coach told you, hey, maybe you want to start asking questions, live a life of curiosity?
Yep.
What other times in your life can you think about when you started asking questions, things began to shift for you?
Well, I mean, both of us are married, and so I can throw up the easy example of being married and trying to solve a lot of problems that nobody wanted help solve.
Yes.
Right?
So good.
So I know that is a very common analogy, but it is a very common problem for some of us that are problem solvers, right? And so being able to do that in my marriage, and really the question that I discovered there and I use elsewhere, and like for all of us, we're going to say, oh, I've heard that before, right? Any leader that's listening to this is going to say, I've heard that question before. I think the thing is, you have to keep asking it until you prove that you really want that question answered and that you're not just doing it. And it's, what do you want from me? Or what do you need from me?
Yeah, that's so
How can I be helpful, right? If I ask that the first time we're in a one-on-one, or the first time that you're just coming to my office and I'm like, hey, I want to be helpful for you. What do you need from me? What does everybody say the first time?
Oh, nothing, I'm good.
Yeah,
right.
100%. Nothing,
Yeah.
I'm good. Nothing, I'm good. And it's going to happen like that the first 6 times.
Yeah.
Right, honestly. And then all of a sudden, there's going to be this thing that's like, I have so much, I don't even know what I don't know. And I'm trying to juggle all of these things. And I think I just need you to take some things off my plate, right?
I think it's so important that you're even the line of questioning. What do you need from me? You're asking an open-ended question. You're almost forcing some dialogue. And a lot of leaders, where we fail is we're asking, hey, are you good? Need anything? Can I get you anything? It's a lot of yes or no responses. And just to your point, the answer is always going to be, no, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm good. They're holding it in until they don't. And it's because they recognize how much you care, because people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And what you're modeling in doing so is true servant leadership, which ties us into the next question about your book. Your book is called Redefine Servant Leadership. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, I'm holding the book up. There's a very handsome man on the cover of this book.
Dude,
Mr.
no,
Jon Kidwell.
There's a very nerdy guy on the front that so many people were like, here, let's fix this up a little bit.
Let's redefine the cover of the Redefine Your Servant Leadership.
That's right, yeah.
So, but Jon, something I love, you mentioned this in your book. I think a lot of leaders who have, John Maxwell is kind of the world-renowned leadership guru, right? And we hear his definition of leadership is leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Your definition of servant leadership that you wrote in the book is, it's the act of influencing the attitudes, thoughts, and behaviors of others towards a shared purpose. I'll tell you, man, I love that definition. Can you speak to the definition, but also why servant leadership? Why do you believe servant leadership is the type of leadership that all leaders should be focusing on?
I think because if we look at leadership at its core, it's nothing else besides that. And so that was a challenge for me in writing the book, is because if you ask me, John, what's the difference between servant leadership and leadership? There isn't one. It's the same thing, right? And so that was one of the challenges for me in doing this, is being able to go that route. So why servant leadership instead of just writing a leadership book? Because I find, and I felt myself, for those of us who see ourselves in a serving profession, or who choose to approach it from I am a servant leader. Like, I answer that interview question, tell me about your leadership style. Like, I'm a servant leader, right? And
Sound like Jimmy Stewart for a bit.
I was going for Patrick Lencioni, but we'll go with that. No, so and you answer that, and all of a sudden you get this deep connection. People can resonate with it, but there's also these connotations, these narratives, and some of them are not good and not healthy.
Yeah.
With, oh, you're a servant leader, so you're probably not really going to focus on performance. You're going to reprioritize and put people above. You're not going to hold them to expectations. You're going to be overly nice and you're going to be sweet and everyone's going to like you, but you might not actually get stuff done. And that's what I was feeling. And I realized in talking with other folks that that wasn't a me thing, that it was a we thing.
Yeah.
And so I came at it from the heart of, this is the type of leadership that I say that I want to do, regardless of its leadership, whatever, right? Like if it's just leadership or if it's situational leadership or transformational leadership, like this is where we're going. And this is the individual I'm trying to write to, because for 10 years, I redefined my own servant leadership and said, what are the narratives that are not helpful, that are keeping me from honestly serving the best I can at the highest level need, or taking out the trash, right? And what's going on in me and in culture, and how might we all be able to grow into being more mission-driven, more servant-hearted, more business-minded, so that everybody that we touch can profit.
You may be answering this next question, John, but when I ask, what is the main message or theme for us to expect from your book, what would you say?
I would say that, number one, a servant leader does not have to feel or actually diminish what strength and talent that they can bring to an organization because of others' perceptions of how you are supposed to be as a servant leader.
Good. Okay.
That a servant leader at its core is mission driven. They are doing something for something bigger than themselves, even organizationally, bigger than the organization, right? Man, we are in the automotive space, we're in the financial space, we're in this space, but it ain't just so that our organization can thrive. Like, we want this to be something beyond our organization.
Yes.
That's the type of mission that servant leaders are on, that they come at it with a heart for serving other people, for saying, how can I benefit you? It doesn't mutually exclusively mean I can't be benefited, that the organization can't be benefited, but how can I help you grow? How can I help you thrive? And sometimes that's through challenge. Like sitting down with someone and saying, you know, Josh, you might be a better leader if you stop giving so much advice, right? Like, that's what I heard. That served me. But they had a heart that said, I want you to win, right? And I want you to do well. And then bringing in that business mindedness, because that is some of the way that we are able to create impactful results for everyone involved, that we can actually grow and extend the impact by having profit, or by being strategic, or by saying yes to this because it's so clearly aligned with who we are and what we do. And a good business mind would say, no, we're not going to open up a soup kitchen, or no, we're not going to go into this other service line and start an entire new sector of our business, because it's going to detract us from the thing that we're supposed to do most, right? And being able to bring those three things together in a way to lead people, to show up and lead inside of the business, is something that I hope people take away from this.
At the end of the day, we're truly doing our team a disservice. I'm going to emphasize that word, a disservice, if we're not sharing truth with them, just as your coach shared with you. Jon, you introduced in the book that there is an idea that myths are around servant leadership.
Yep.
So what are some of these myths that we need to know about servant leadership?
All of them are felt and lived and followed by me before I ever dare write these down. And so what I put out in there is that there are myths, like misconceptions, norms, negative cultural narratives around servant leadership, and that what they do is they actually create misguided servants. That these are good things that when we play them all the way out, turn into things that are no longer good, right? Like one of them is that servant leaders must be nice. And that's a wonderful thing. Like you have children, I have children, you have children. We want our kids to be nice, right?
Yeah.
And I do, and be polite and do all those things and be nice. What I realized is if I must be nice and I play that thing all the way out, there is a point where it flips, and now I'm actually being nice because I care more about what you think about me than what I'm doing for you, right? And kindness, telling the kind truth, like you said, that kind truth actually means that sometimes I might look like a jerk, which is, how can you be a servant and be a jerk? Like, I'm not intending to. I want to do the kind truth. I don't want to be a jerk, and it might be a hard pill to swallow.
When at the end of the day, you're able to assume positive intent. If both parties are assuming positive intent, we know where it's coming from. I'm pointing to my heart here. It's a good place, right? We know where it's coming from. So when you share with me the hard truth, it may be a tough pill for me to swallow, but at the end of the day, you're sharing something with me because you love me, because you care about me. And a great leader is always going to share the hard truths.
Yep.
And really, if I stop receiving feedback, that's where I need to be concerned. But until then, I think it's a great opportunity to regularly speak truth, good, bad, and ugly, into those that we're leading.
So that was one, and then I'll go through the other ones faster. We won't deep dive on all of them, but there are like that servant leaders must be people pleasers, and we reframe it and say no, they must be mission driven, right?
Good.
And that actually informs how we treat people. But other ones like they must be permissive or always got to be available, because as soon as I tell you no, it means I obviously don't care about you or about the work. And that isn't always true either, right? Or the one that it was mine that I really had to wrestle with was that a servant leader has a bleeding heart and that they must have a bleeding heart. And I was like, what does this mean? I must Google. Ventricular rupture is like the medical term for bleeding heart made by people that are way smarter than me. And then I'm like, what happens when you have a ventricular rupture? Most often, death, right? Your heart is bleeding uncontrollably, you die. And if we do that in the business where we have no restraint and no constraint, if I'm out leveraging my resources, if I'm overburdening or working my people because I can't say no, it's not going to work. But if I take a servant heart and I pair it with a business mind and I show up with that, then it's not just business. And I'm not just showing up bleeding heart, like take everything we have and there's no boundaries and there's no prices, we'll just give it all away, which is great. Like if that's the business model, you should totally go into that business model and figure out how to make that work, right? Or trust God to make it work because he'll do crazy things. His math is different than our math.
Yeah.
But if that is not your business model, if it is in fact something where, hey, we're going to do a service and we're going to provide a service that we charge for, pairing that servant heart and that business mind, not just letting it go untethered in either direction.
You said a key word, boundaries. And even in your book, you really go into boundaries and why they're necessary. Can you speak a little bit into what boundaries mean and how it can benefit you as a leader? So I establish them.
Yeah. So here's what I think about, right? Like you and I live next to each other. We actually don't, but we're going there for this analogy is that Josh and I live next to each other and you got your house and I got my house. And then there's that little strip of land in between. Is it yours? Is it mine? I don't know. So what usually happens? Usually either I mow that grass and then you go and you tell your wife, you can't believe that John's mowing that grass. I set it at a 3. He does it at a 5 inch. It looks sloppy. Like, why didn't he go mow his grass at a 3? Right?
Yeah.
Or neither one of us know what to do. So none of us touch it. And now we have the wetlands just like going in between there and it's all grown up. And a boundary is just setting where you are, where I am, what your priorities are, what my priorities are. It's a fence around your property. Right? And great boundaries have places that you can get in and out of. They're not walls that have no doors, right? They have some doors. Some of them are really locked and you don't get to change those. And some of those might be open and other people ask for permission to go freely through those, but it's setting up a fence of who you are, what your values are, what you're going to do, not do, what your priorities are, so that people know, right? They know who you are. They can then come in where they are. They know what you're going to bring to a situation. They know how I can complement your strengths or come alongside and support you. But it's really just establishing the difference between your house and my house, whether that's in my role at work, whether that's in when I do work time and don't do work time, whether that is priorities in my life, which may be faith, family, friends, work, or what those look like for you.
Love it. Jon, we know that this is a personal growth and leadership development book at its core. So how do we reinforce what we learn so that we can actually put into practice and make positive changes?
So somebody that you and I both enjoy, Jon Acuff, wrote a book called Soundtracks. And I didn't actually put it in the book, but I love his idea about just flipping it. Like in Soundtracks, he talks about a negative narrative, flip it. And so we've been kind of trained into having a little bit of the like, oh, bless your heart, servant leader type of thing, right? Like, oh, you're so sweet. You're in it for the people. When you want to do business, like, let's talk. And it's like, no. This is the best way to do business. So you're right. Let's talk. So flip that identity. I am a servant leader. And instead of all of the stuff that we might pair with that says, I must be nice. I have to be permissive. I got to do all of these different things. Go into it with I am a servant leader. I am mission driven. I am servant hearted. I am business minded. Rewrite it so that the identity is something that serves you, and then start serving other people.
Excellent.
And then after that, just start taking small steps into it, right? Once you do that, start taking small steps into what does it look like for you to prepare and maybe go have that difficult conversation that you've been sitting on. You're like, well, I can't actually talk to Gary about this because as soon as I do, Gary's going to think I'm a jerk and he's going to think I don't care about him. And I'm just telling him, you missed this deadline 17 times, Gary. You got to get it in on Friday or else you don't get to keep working here if this continues. That's an okay thing, right? Prepare for it. Go step into it. Take baby steps. Maybe it's not the conversation with Gary. Maybe it's actually just telling somebody, you know what? I'm going home today. It's 5:00 and I'm going to go see my family. And that's your first step into setting a boundary, right? But find where you can start and then just keep adding on these small steps.
It allows those around us to know what we will and what we won't tolerate in a professional manner.
Exactly.
All right, Jon, if I'm an executive leader in any organization, how do I bring the idea and values of a redefined servant leader into my organization and my people?
Okay, so Andy Stanley says, if your values are on the wall and not in the hall, you're going to have problems, right? And so what I usually caution folks with when we go into organizations is don't, which, is kind of, I guess, counterintuitive, but don't leave today and take all that we just talked about in creating these values and kind of priorities and all these and put them up on the wall right away. I actually say start living them out so that when you do, people are like, well, yeah, I mean, that's just how we do stuff, right?
Sure.
So I know I have the tendency, a lot of executive leaders, all of it were mission driven, right? And we're like, we can do this. We like to drive hard. So we read the book and we say, oh, these values are great. Boom. Hey, everyone, this is not what we're doing.
Yep.
Okie dokie. And there might be a different strategy for approaching that. And so the first thing that I would say is start with yourself. Really look at what are some of those values that I hold. We walk through in the book just a little bit, like what are my core values? What are the core values of this business? And if they're not there, like what are the aspirational ones we need to start building into and figuring that out? And then start to think about, okay, if we have this business and we want to look at this as an opportunity to further the specific mission that we are on through everything that we do, through how we treat people, through the products and services that we have, through even what we do with our money and how we resource and compensate our people and how we might actually give our money away to other places that we either care about or that are on the same mission that we are. We talk about a through, not to mentality, right? And you think
Through, not to.
Through, not to. And so if you think about a river as it goes, sediment is going with it. And when it hits certain banks, a lot of sediment is deposited, but there's also others that get picked up and go. It's not that you don't take out of the business and that you don't reward your people and that it's giving everything away, but it's just, what does it look like for stuff to come to you and through you and to other things that you care about?
Excellent.
Kind of in a generosity model. So once you start working through those things, start living them out by talking with your team, talking with your executive team, starting to kind of practice without publicizing these. And then once you've lived these out for 3 to 6 months, now all of a sudden start to turn it and publicize and make it public and make it, hey, here's the things that I've learned, that I've seen in here, that we've already had these conversations a number of times. Like, now I want to share to everybody that we value service, growth, and generosity. And everyone's going to say, yeah, of course, like we always do. Like, yeah, and you've been saying those things for like this amount of time. And then all of a sudden it's this natural way to bring them in there, and then start looking for ways, once you do that, where you can communicate it, where you can cascade it, and where you can just ever so slightly, usually it's just 1 degree off. It's not this huge 180-degree turn, where you can start turning things to more align with the mission that you're on, with the values that you have, and with the way that you want to treat people, and use the business as a platform for the mission that you are on.
I really appreciate this approach, Jon, and I like the fact that you're even giving a potential time frame. It could take 3 to 6 months, because we know that change doesn't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time to influence an entire team on the values, the mission, the vision. Something that I think is important is you're sharing with the audience how you're beginning to live this out first. You're not making this blanket statement like, okay, it's January 1st, new year, new me, right? New year, new us, new year, new team.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the fact that you alluded to how it's often just a small degree in a shift. For some of us, we just feel like we have to make this massive 180-degree sweeping change overnight. But the reality is, you and I both know that's not sustainable. And if we can begin to model this and share with our team how, look, you are already this close, like you're so close. And we can just change a slight shift in perspective, because with perspective, the way that we view things drives the way that we do things.
That's right.
We do a slight shift, and all of a sudden, we're experiencing as a team massive breakthrough because of the way that you're modeling and serving them accordingly. Well, Jon, let me ask you this, off the cuff here.
Yes.
Off the A cuff, unintended, clearly. So what would you say has been the greatest win for you as a coach? In terms of, you've been coaching now with your company Lead Well for 4 years. What has been the greatest win for you that you've seen in the 4-year experience that you've had?
My favorite absolute thing is when you're working with someone and they look at you and pause and they say, huh, never thought about that way. Like, that to me is we've struck a chord.
Yeah.
We've engaged in critical thinking. There's been some reflection. The perspective might change, which means now I'm going to do something just a little bit differently. I think that is the most fun, just fulfilling, absolute joy of, and like, usually I'm on a call or I'm sitting with someone and I'm like trying to hold back the smile, but I can't, right? Like, as you said, there's a really dorky smile, so it's coming out wherever I go. But I'm trying to hold it back, and I'm just thinking like, man, like, this is going to be so good for everybody around you and for you, because you've just had this aha. Because I know when I've had those ahas, the change that has happened in and around and through me. And so that one is super fun. The one that is weird, and I know you have this too, is when someone says, I took something that you taught me, or I did this, or I read this, and then I just insert anything. I put it in this team meeting. I did this thing, and I'm like, cool. That is the weirdest, but the coolest, the best thing is just when they're like, I never thought about that way.
That's so good. I actually thought you were going to go a slightly different direction, because I've had times when someone's like, man, hey, I took what you shared with me and I told the whole team exactly that, which is da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, I don't know that I've ever shared that ever in my life. But hey, if you took that away from what we had a conversation on, I'm glad, because clearly it helped.
Yeah.
But yeah, such a unique and interesting times whenever you're there's so many different people that you're working with, and that's also just speaking to the benefit of being a coach. This is how we are also growing through coaching, which has been a tremendous blessing that I can speak to, of that, when you're working with folks, again, you're not you're not giving them the answers. We often don't have the answers. You and I don't. As a coach, we might have suggestions, but as a coach, our opinion, quite honestly, is irrelevant.
Yeah.
A lot of times, through the right questions that we're asking, they're able to discover those answers on their own. And so when they have those epiphany, light bulb, aha moments, that really is a huge blessing for when you're coaching someone. Well, Jon, how can our audience get in touch with you? How can they connect with you? Where can they go by Redefine Your Servant Leadership?
So you said it, and if you put .com at the end of that, it'll take them to the page. So redefineyourservantleadership.com, and it will take you to where you can purchase it. Kind of the most popular one is Amazon. It's great. As of today, they're still offering it at the launch price discount, so you should go fast because I don't know when that's going to change.
Awesome.
But awesome stuff, right? Go there. And the website for the business is leadwell.com, and you can connect with me at Jon Kidwell on most places, and the business at the Leadwell page on most platforms.
Very good. And that's Jon, Jon.
Yeah, you can't hear the H, so why use it?
There you go.
So
I like that. I like
that. Yeah, JonKidwell.
Excellent. Which I just realized the Kidwell, the lead well, that's
a slow burn. There's a whole nother podcast on how that was an accidental win. So yeah, there we go.
So good, man. Well, Jon, man, thank you so much for being here. I know this will not be your last time on the Josh Parnell Leadership Podcast.
I hope not. I hope this is the start of something awesome.
Yes, sir. It absolutely will be. Listeners, thank you for tuning in to the podcast. Thanks again. Have a great day. Don't forget to smile today. Tell your loved ones how much they mean to you. I'm Josh Parnell, reminding you to keep leading well.